people don't feel lost because they lack direction. They feel lost because they're constantly busy doing things that don't actually matter to them, checking boxes, meeting expectations, moving fast in directions they never consciously chose, until one day they wake up tired. Not just physically, but tired of living on autopilot. If that sounds familiar, you're not alone. Welcome back to the Daily Better. A quiet space to slow down, think clearly, and reconnect with what truly matters beneath the noise. Elon Musk is often talked about as someone who thinks differently, someone who builds impossible things, someone who ignores limits most people accept without question. But if you strip away the fame, the companies, the headlines, what's left is not genius in the way we usually imagine it. What's left is a simple but uncomfortable habit, the refusal to accept assumptions without questioning them, and the discipline to always return to what matters first. This way of thinking is often called first principles thinking, but today, I want to talk about it in a more human way as the practice of putting first things first. Not in your calendar, but in your life. Most of us don't live by first principles. We live by inherited logic. We follow paths because they were already there. We make decisions based on what's normal, expected, or socially rewarded. We ask questions like, what should I do next, instead of what actually matters to me right now and over time? This subtle difference changes everything. When Elon Musk talks about building rockets or electric cars, he doesn't start with how things have always been done. He starts by breaking problems down to their most fundamental truths. What is absolutely necessary, what is actually impossible, and what just hasn't been tried differently yet. Then he builds up from there. In everyday life, we rarely do this. We inherit definitions of success without examining them. We inherit timelines. We inherit fears. We inherit urgency. And then we wonder why our lives feel crowded but empty at the same time. Putting first things first begins with an uncomfortable realization. Many of the things consuming your energy are not essential. They are simply familiar. They exist because you've never paused long enough to question them. Think about how you spend your days. How much of your time is shaped by true priorities? And how much is shaped by momentum? How many choices are intentional? And how many are reactions? Most people don't burn out because they do too much. They burn out because they do too much of what doesn't align. First principles thinking forces you to slow down long enough to ask deeper questions. Not, how can I be more productive, but what deserves my energy in the first place? Not, how do I get ahead, but ahead of what? And toward what Elon Musk is known for asking. Why repeatedly not once, but again and again, until the surface-level answers fall apart? In personal life, this can feel uncomfortable, even destabilizing, because when you ask, why am I doing this enough times, you may realize you don't have a solid answer anymore. Why this job? Why this pace? Why this relationship? Why this pressure you put on yourself every single day and sometimes? The honest answer is simply because you've always done it this way. Because changing feels risky. Because stopping to think feels scarier than staying busy. Putting first things first doesn't mean doing what's easiest. It means doing what's most honest. And honesty often disrupts comfort. Many people believe clarity comes before action. But clarity often comes from action, especially action rooted in first principles. When you stop chasing what looks good and start moving toward what feels true. Confusion slowly gives way to alignment. One of the most overlooked aspects of Elon Musk's thinking is his willingness to look foolish early. When you build from first principles, you don't have social proof, you don't have a script, you don't have reassurance that you're doing the right thing. And in personal life, that can feel terrifying. Choosing what matters to you instead of what's admired often means disappointing people, confusing them, or temporarily falling behind in ways that look visible on the outside. But first principles thinking reminds you that being early often looks like being wrong. Until it doesn't. Another powerful shift that comes from this mindset is realizing that not every problem needs optimization. Some problems need elimination. Instead of asking how to manage your time better, you ask which commitments shouldn't exist at all. Instead of asking how to stay motivated, you ask why your life requires constant motivation to endure. When Elon Musk looks at a system, he doesn't just make it faster, he questions whether the system itself makes sense. Applying that to your own life might mean questioning routines you've outgrown, goals that no longer inspire you, or standards that don't belong to you anymore. This is where first thing first becomes deeply personal. Because it's not about efficiency, it's about values. It's about deciding what deserves to be protected: your energy, your focus, your mental health, your sense of meaning, and what you're willing to let go of to preserve them. Many people feel stuck not because they lack options, but because they're trying to win at a game they never wanted to play. They measure themselves using metrics designed for someone else's life. They rush because others are rushing. They feel behind because they're comparing themselves to people with entirely different circumstances. First principles thinking frees you from that trap by asking a radical question. If no one were watching, what would matter to me? And then, an even harder one, am I willing to live by that answer? This mindset doesn't make life easier. It makes life clearer. And clarity is often uncomfortable before it's empowering. When you know what matters, excuses disappear. You can no longer hide behind confusion or overwhelm. You become responsible for your choices, and that responsibility can feel heavy at first. But it's also where freedom lives. Freedom isn't doing whatever you want. Freedom is knowing why you're doing what you're doing. It's waking up with fewer internal conflicts. It's spending less time proving yourself and more time building something that feels real to you. You don't need to think like a billionaire to benefit from this mindset. You just need the courage to pause and ask better questions than you did yesterday. Questions that strip away noise instead of adding more. What is truly essential in this season of my life? What am I holding on to out of fear? Not alignment. If I removed everything non-essential, what would remain? You don't need perfect answers. You need honest ones. Because putting first things first isn't about having a perfect plan. It's about living with intention instead of inertia. And sometimes, that single shift changes everything. I'll see you in the next episode of The Daily Better.